The stars had witnessed many things over the countless years. Wars that burned entire systems, peace treaties signed in the void between worlds, and the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But in all that time, nothing had puzzled the galaxy quite like Earth. The Galactic Council sat in their massive station orbiting the neutron star Kepler 442, just as they had for over 3,000 years. Representatives from 47 different species filled the great chamber, their varied forms creating a tapestry of alien life. Some floated in energy fields, others stood on multiple legs, and a few existed as pure thought given temporary form. But all of them shared one thing in common. They had once knelt before the Council's might. Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Zephyrians gestured with one of his 6 arms toward the holographic display, showing a small blue world. "It has been exactly 200 standard years since we made contact with the humans," he announced, his voice ringing like wind chimes in the vast chamber. 200 years since we offered them the greatest gift any primitive species could receive: membership in our council. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Every species remembered their first contact with the council. The awe, the gratitude, the desperate scrambling to prove themselves worthy of advanced technology and guidance. It was the natural order of things. The strong led, the weak followed, and everyone benefited from the arrangement. Counselor Zextar of the Hegemony, a massive being whose metallic skin reflected the chamber's lights, leaned forward in his floating throne. "And what was their response, Ambassador? Surely they fell to their knees in gratitude, as is proper." Veltar's crystalline features shifted in what might have been confusion. "That is precisely the problem, Counselor," they said. "Thank you, but no." The chamber fell silent. In 3 millennia of expansion, no species had ever declined membership in the Galactic Council. It simply did not happen. The benefits were too obvious, the alternative too frightening. "Perhaps they misunderstood," suggested Counselor Himka, whose translucent form pulsed with soft blue light. "Their translation systems were primitive. Surely they could not have grasped the magnitude of our offer. We made the offer in 17 different languages and used universal mathematical concepts," Veltar replied. "Their understanding was complete. They thanked us for the invitation, expressed hope for continued peaceful relations, and politely declined to join." The ethereal collective's representative, an ancient consciousness that existed as shifting patterns of light, spoke with a voice like distant thunder. "In 200 years, what contact have we maintained with these humans?" Veltar consulted his datapad, though the information was burned into his memory. They established modest trade relationships with border worlds. They purchase basic raw materials and sell what they call artisan goods, handcrafted items, cultural artifacts, and some surprisingly effective medicines derived from their world's plants. They pay fair prices, honor all contracts, and have never once requested advanced technology. "Never?" Zextar's voice carried disbelief. "Not even defensive weapons? Faster ships? Medical advances that could save millions of their people? Never. When offered, they respond with gratitude for the thought, but always decline. They seem content with what they have." Counselor Thexera of the warrior caste, her forearms crossed in a gesture of dismissal, spoke with barely concealed irritation. "Content? No species is content with primitive technology when better exists. They must be planning something. Building weapons in secret, preparing for war." The ethereal collective's representative pulsed thoughtfully. "Our deep space monitors show no unusual energy signatures from human space. No massive construction projects, no military buildups. Their technology appears to have advanced at a steady but unremarkable pace." "Then they are fools," Zextar declared, "and fools cannot be allowed to embarrass the Council indefinitely. What example does this set for other species? That they can simply ignore our authority?" Ambassador Veltar shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, Counselor, they have not ignored our authority. They acknowledge the Council's sovereignty over Council space and follow all interstellar laws when traveling through our territory. They simply exist independently." "Independence is an illusion," Thexara growled. "There is strength and there is weakness. There is civilization and there is barbarism. These humans cannot have both independence and survival in a galaxy that follows natural law." The debate continued for hours, as it had for decades. Some counselors found humanity's behavior merely amusing, a primitive species playing at being equals with their betters. Others saw it as a dangerous precedent that needed correction. And a few, like the Ethereal Collective, watched with growing unease. On Earth, President Sarah Chen stood in her office overlooking the Pacific Ocean, reading the latest intelligence reports from their observation posts scattered throughout the galaxy. Her advisors sat around the polished wooden table, their faces reflecting the same careful neutrality that had served humanity well for 2 centuries. "The Council is getting impatient," reported Director James Walsh, head of External Affairs. "Our people at the border stations say Council patrols have increased by 30% in the last 6 months. They're not crossing into our space, but they're making their presence known." Chen nodded slowly. "Any changes to their fleet compositions?" "Nothing unusual. Standard patrol groups, mostly scientific vessels with light escort, but the frequency is new." Secretary of Defense Maria Santos leaned forward. "Sarah, maybe it's time to consider their offers more seriously. The technological gap between us and them is enormous. We've managed to hold our own so far, but if they ever decide to take direct action..." Chen turned from the window, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "Maria, do you remember why our ancestors first chose silence?" Santos nodded. "Because they were watching, learning, waiting." "And what did they learn?" "That the Council rules through intimidation disguised as benevolence. That every species that joins surrenders not just independence, but the right to determine their own future." Santos paused. "And that the Council has never faced a species that said no." Chen moved to the wall display showing a map of human space. 37 star systems over 200 worlds, and nearly 50 billion people who had chosen a different path. "The Council thinks we're primitive because we don't ask for their gifts. They think we're weak because we don't fear their power. They think we're fools because we smile and nod and go our own way." Director Walsh spoke carefully. "And what are we really?" Chen smiled, and for just a moment, something very old and very patient showed in her eyes. "We're exactly what we appear to be, James. We're humans. We're polite, we're reasonable, and we mind our own business." Her smile faded, "until someone makes that impossible." The meeting ended with the same decision they had made for 200 years. Maintain the course, stay alert, and let the galaxy think what it would. Humanity had learned long ago that the loudest voice in the room was rarely the most dangerous one. Above Earth, hidden in orbits that should have been empty, automated systems continued their patient watch. They had been watching for 2 centuries now, gathering data, analyzing patterns, and preparing for the day when politeness would no longer be enough. In the depths of Luna Base, Admiral Rebecca Torres reviewed the latest tactical assessments. The numbers were sobering, but not for the reasons the Council might expect. After 200 years of observation, humanity knew exactly what they were facing. More importantly, they knew exactly what they could do about it. The Council believed in the natural order of the strong ruling the weak. Soon they would learn that nature had many ways of defining strength. 5 years after the great debate in the Council chambers, patience was wearing thin among the galaxy's ruling elite. What had started as mild curiosity about humanity's strange behavior had grown into something much more dangerous: wounded pride. Councillor Zextar paced his private chambers aboard the Council station, his metallic feet ringing against the crystalline floor. Through the massive viewport, he could see the swirling energies of the neutron star that powered their civilization's heart. All of this magnificence, all of this power, and somewhere in the outer spiral arm, a species of hairless apes continued to act as if none of it mattered. "Show me the latest reports," he commanded, and his aide immediately activated the holographic displays. The data painted a picture that would have been laughable if it were not so infuriating. Human trade continued at its modest pace. Their ships arrived on schedule, conducted business with quiet efficiency, and departed without ceremony. They asked no questions about Council technology, showed no interest in political developments, and seemed genuinely content with their simple existence. "Have they responded to the new trade restrictions?" Zextar asked. His aide, a nervous creature from a recently conquered world, consulted its datapad. "They have rerouted their trading through the Vorthon independent systems. No complaints filed, no diplomatic protests. They simply adapted." Zextar's anger flared. The trade restrictions had been carefully designed to inconvenience humanity, to force them to come crawling to the Council for relief. Instead, they had found alternative partners within days and continued as if nothing had happened. And the diplomatic missions? All 17 invitations to council ceremonies have been politely declined. Each response included thanks for the invitation, regrets that schedule conflicts prevented attendance, and hopes for continued peaceful relations. Schedule conflicts. As if these primitives had anything more important to do than attend the galaxy's most prestigious events. Zextar had been particularly proud of the wording of the latest invitation. Barely concealed condescension wrapped in diplomatic language that should have left no doubt about humanity's inferior status. Their response had been so polite it was almost insulting. In the Council's military headquarters, Admiral Kethvale of the Enforcement Division studied fleet deployment reports with growing frustration. His orders were clear: increase patrol presence near human space without violating any treaties. It was a delicate balance, designed to remind humanity of the Council's power while maintaining plausible deniability. The humans' response to our patrol increases? He asked his tactical officer. Standard protocol, Admiral. They hail our ships, offer assistance if needed, and provide helpful navigation data for local hazards. Last week, a human cargo vessel actually guided one of our patrol ships around an unstable gravity well that our sensors had missed. Kethaval's 3 eyes narrowed in annoyance. They were supposed to be intimidated, not helpful. Any signs of military buildup in response to our presence? None, sir. No fleet movements, no activation of defensive installations, no change in patrol patterns. If anything, they seem pleased to see us. The Admiral turned to stare out at the stars. In his experience, species responded to shows of force in predictable ways. They either submitted immediately, prepared for war, or tried to negotiate. Humanity did none of these things. They simply continued existing as if the Council's mighty fleets were tourist attractions. Perhaps, suggested his aide cautiously, they do not understand the message we are sending? Kethaval considered this. It was possible. These humans had no experience with galactic politics, no understanding of the subtle ways superior civilizations communicated their displeasure. Maybe they genuinely believed the Council was just being neighborly. Increase the patrol frequency along the border, he ordered, and make sure our largest battleships are prominently displayed. Even primitives understand the sight of superior firepower. Meanwhile, in the Council's Economic Division, Minister Hexara reviewed the latest trade analysis with growing bewilderment. The human economy should have been suffering under the new restrictions. Their trading partners should have been pressured into abandoning them. Instead, the opposite was happening. Explain these numbers, she demanded, pointing at the holographic display. Her economic advisor, a being whose entire existence was devoted to understanding market forces, gestured helplessly. The humans have formed what they call alternate trade networks, with independent systems. These networks are actually more efficient than the Council-approved routes. Several minor species have abandoned Council trade agreements to join human networks instead. Hexara felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. How many species? 17 at last count. And the number is growing. This was unprecedented. Species did not abandon Council trade agreements. The benefits were too great, the alternatives too limited. Yet somehow, humanity's simple trading practices were attracting partners away from the galaxy's dominant economic system. What are they offering that we cannot? Nothing exceptional, Minister. Fair prices, reliable delivery, and something they call no-strings-attached commerce. They do not require political agreements, military access, or cultural exchange programs. They simply trade goods for goods and honor their contracts. Hexara stared at the data in disbelief. The humans were succeeding by not trying to succeed. They were gaining influence by refusing to use it. They were becoming a threat by pretending to be harmless. On Earth, President Chen met with her cabinet in the secure conference room beneath the Capitol building. The intelligence reports painted a clear picture of the Council's growing frustration, but also revealed something more concerning. They're testing us, reported Director Walsh. The increased patrols, the trade restrictions, the increasingly insulting diplomatic language. They want to see how we respond to pressure. Secretary Santos studied the tactical displays showing Council fleet movements. Their positioning suggests they're preparing for something more than patrols. These formations could easily become invasion fleets with minimal reorganization. Chen nodded thoughtfully. How are our people responding to the increased Council presence? Exactly as trained, Santos replied. Polite, helpful, completely non-threatening. But Sarah, we can't keep this up forever. Eventually, they're going to escalate beyond what politeness can handle. I know, Chen said quietly. The question is whether they'll come to their senses first or if we'll have to teach them why our ancestors chose patience over pride. Director Walsh leaned forward. The Vorthan independent systems have formally requested a mutual defense pact. The Cathani Republic wants to establish a permanent embassy. Even some council member species are sending unofficial inquiries about alternative arrangements. Chen smiled grimly. The council is creating the very problem they're trying to prevent. Their pressure is driving species toward us, not away from us. But for how long? Santos asked. If they decide to make an example of us, those same species will scatter like leaves. Nobody wants to face the council's military might. No, Chen agreed. They don't. But that's because they've never seen anyone survive it. In his chambers, Counselor Zextar received a private communication that made his anger boil over. The message was from a lesser council member, a species whose world the council had protected for over a century. They were formally requesting permission to withdraw from certain trade agreements in favor of arrangements with humanity. This was intolerable. It was not enough that the humans themselves refused to submit. Now they were corrupting other species, spreading their dangerous ideas of independence and self-determination. Something had to be done before this infection spread further. Zextar opened a communication channel to his most trusted allies on the council. It was time to stop playing games with these primitive apes. It was time to remind the galaxy why the strong ruled and the weak obeyed. The taunting had begun in earnest, but humanity continued to smile and wave and go about their business. Soon, Zextar promised himself, that smile would be wiped away forever. The galaxy would remember its proper order, and humanity would learn their place in it. What Zextar did not know was that humanity was counting on exactly that response. They had been patient for 200 years, but patience was not the same as passivity. And when the council finally revealed their true nature, humanity would be ready to reveal theirs. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called after 3 more member species formally requested permission to establish independent trade relationships with humanity. The great chamber buzzed with tension as representatives hurried to their positions, sensing that something momentous was about to happen. Counselor Zextar stood at the center of the assembly, his metallic form gleaming under the harsh lights. Around him, the greatest powers in the galaxy waited to hear his words. He had spent weeks crafting this speech, choosing each phrase to maximum effect. "Fellow counselors," he began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber and broadcast across the galaxy. "We face a crisis that threatens the very foundation of galactic civilization." The chamber fell silent. Even the floating energy beings seemed to pause in their eternal motion. For 200 years, we have watched a primitive species called humanity reject our guidance, ignore our wisdom, and mock our authority through their stubborn independence. This alone would be tolerable. The galaxy has room for fools who wish to remain in darkness. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Several counselors nodded their approval of Zextar's reasonable tone. But now, Zextar's voice rose, taking on the deep resonance that had cowed 1,000 worlds. These primitive apes have begun to spread their poison. Species that have prospered under our protection are being seduced by human promises of independence and self-determination. They forget the chaos that existed before the council brought order to the galaxy. Counselor Thexara of the warrior caste stood, her forearms raised in salute. The counselor speaks truth. Order requires hierarchy. Hierarchy requires submission. The humans undermine both. The ethereal collective's representative pulsed with concern. Perhaps diplomacy could still resolve this matter. The humans have never shown hostility toward the council. Zextar's laugh was like metal scraping stone. Diplomacy? We have tried diplomacy for 2 centuries. We have offered them gifts beyond imagination, and they have spurned everyone. We have shown them patience beyond measure, and they have repaid us with contempt. He gestured toward the galactic map hanging in the chamber's center, where human space was marked in modest blue. Look at them. 37 systems, 200 worlds, 50 billion individuals who believe they can exist without acknowledging their betters. This delusion has become dangerous. The chamber held its breath as Zextar moved toward his conclusion. Therefore, by the authority vested in me by this council, and for the good of galactic civilization, I hereby declare that humanity will be placed under protective supervision. Their government will be dissolved. Their worlds will be administered by council appointees. Their military will be disbanded, and their people will finally learn the benefits of proper guidance. The silence that followed was deafening. Even among the council's ranks, this was unprecedented. No species had ever been forcibly subjugated without first committing an act of aggression. But Zextar was not finished. Perhaps, he continued, his voice dripping with disdain, when these hairless apes are properly domesticated, they might prove useful as a servant species. Their stubborn nature could be channeled toward productive labor, once their delusions of equality are corrected. The broadcast ended with formal notice that humanity had 72 standard hours to surrender control of their government to council administrators. Failure to comply would result in military enforcement of the Protective Supervision Decree. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence. The council had just declared war on a species whose only crime was minding their own business. On Earth, President Chen stood in the emergency command center surrounded by her top advisors and military commanders. The council's ultimatum played on screens around the room, but no one was paying attention to it anymore. They had more pressing concerns. Fleet status? Chen asked calmly. Admiral Torres consulted her displays. All units are at their assigned positions. Deep space monitoring stations report normal activity along the borders. No sign of immediate council fleet movements. They'll come, said Secretary Santos grimly. Zextar just staked his entire reputation on breaking us. He can't back down now. Director Walsh looked up from his communication console. Sarah, we're receiving messages from 43 different species expressing concern about the council's declaration. 17 are offering various forms of support. Chen nodded without surprise. And the Vorthon Independent Systems? President Kala sent a personal message. The Vorthons are formally condemning the Council's action and requesting permission to send observer ships to human space. Granted. Any other urgent business? General Harrison, head of planetary defense, spoke quietly. Ma'am, the people are asking what we're going to do. They're scared, but they're also angry. Nobody wants to surrender. Chen walked to the window overlooking the capital city. Below, life continued much as it always had. People went to work, children played in parks, and the great machinery of human civilization hummed along peacefully. This was what they were fighting to preserve. Draft a response to the council, she said finally. Keep it simple. 20 minutes later, the message went out on all frequencies, broadcast to every corner of human space and beyond. President Chen appeared on screen, her expression calm but her eyes steel. To the Galactic Council and all who would hear these words, we have received your ultimatum and your offer of protective supervision. We respectfully decline. She paused, letting the words sink in across the galaxy. Furthermore, we hereby withdraw from all council treaties and trade agreements. Effective immediately, galactic vessels are no longer welcome in human space without prior diplomatic clearance. We thank the council for their interest in our welfare, but we are quite capable of managing our own affairs. Another pause, longer this time. We wish the council well in their future endeavors and hope that this unfortunate misunderstanding can be resolved through peaceful means. To our friends among the galactic community, our doors remain open to all who come in peace. The message ended without threats, without anger, without fear, just a polite but firm rejection of the council's authority. In the council chambers, the response was met with stunned disbelief. No species had ever simply said no to an ultimatum, backed by the galaxy's most powerful military force. The humans had not even tried to negotiate or bargain for better terms. They had just declined. Councillor Zextar felt his rage building to dangerous levels. These primitive fools had just humiliated him before the entire galaxy. He had offered them a chance to surrender with dignity, and they had thrown it back in his face. Mobilize the fleets, he commanded. If these apes want to learn their place the hard way, we shall be happy to teach them. Admiral Kethaval received his orders within the hour. 3 full battle fleets, representing the finest military technology in the galaxy, were to proceed to human space and enforce the Council's will. It should have been a simple operation. Humanity had never shown any significant military capabilities, and their territory was modest compared to the Council's vast resources. The fleets began moving toward human space, their passage tracked by deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. It was the largest military deployment in decades, A show of force designed to remind everyone why the Council ruled and others obeyed. What nobody knew was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 200 years. In the depths of space, in hidden installations scattered throughout their territory, and in the hearts of 50 billion humans who had never learned to bow, forces were stirring that would change the galaxy forever. The Council had finally crossed the line, and humanity was about to show them what that meant. Admiral Keithval commanded the largest military force deployed in over 3 centuries. 3 full battle fleets, each containing ships that could reduce planets to ash, moved steadily toward human space. The Dominion, his flagship, was a marvel of Council engineering. 5 kilometers of armor and weapons that represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology. Estimated time to human border? He asked his tactical officer. 18 standard hours, Admiral. All ships are maintaining formation and showing green across all systems. Keithval studied the tactical display with satisfaction. First Fleet would approach from the galactic north, targeting humanity's outer colonies. Second Fleet would strike from the west, aiming for their industrial systems. Third Fleet, under his personal command, would drive straight for Earth itself. It was a textbook invasion plan, designed to overwhelm any possible defense and end resistance quickly. Any response from the humans to our approach? Negative, sir. Deep space sensors show normal traffic patterns in human space. No fleet movements, no defensive preparations, no communication intercepts suggesting military alert. The Admiral nodded. As expected. The humans had no idea what was coming, and even if they did, there was little they could do about it. Their largest ships were barely cruiser class by Council standards, and their total fleet numbered perhaps a few hundred vessels. Against 3,000 ships of the line, they might as well surrender now. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a message from human space. It's addressed to all Council fleets. Put it through. A human appeared on the main screen, a woman in a simple blue uniform with graying hair and calm eyes. Behind her, Keithval could see what looked like a ship's bridge, though the design was unfamiliar. This is Fleet Admiral Rebecca Torres of the Terran Defense Force, she said, her voice carrying clearly across space. To all Council vessels currently approaching human space, you are in violation of interstellar law. You have been asked to request diplomatic clearance before entering our territory. This is your final warning to comply with established protocols. Keithval laughed, a sound that echoed through his bridge. A final warning? From them? He opened a return channel. Admiral Torres, this is Admiral Keithval of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. You will stand down all defensive systems and prepare to receive Council administrators. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Torres' expression didn't change. Admiral, you have 5 minutes to alter course and comply with diplomatic protocols. After that, we will consider your fleets an act of aggression and respond accordingly. The channel closed. Around the bridge, Keithval's officers exchanged amused glances. The human's calm confidence was either admirable courage or complete delusion. Increase speed to maximum, Keithval ordered. Let's end this farce quickly. 4 minutes and 37 seconds later, First Fleet simply vanished. The disappearance was so sudden and complete that it took several moments for the sensor operators to believe their readings. One moment, 200 ships were approaching the Proxima Centauri system. The next moment, empty space. Sensor malfunction? Keithval asked, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Negative, sir. All systems are functioning normally. First Fleet is gone. Before Keithval could respond, his communications officer spoke urgently. Sir, we're receiving a message from First Fleet Admiral Hexnara. The signal was weak and filled with static, but Admiral Hexnara's image appeared on screen. Behind her, Keithval could see what looked like a human ship's interior. Clean, functional, and completely intact. Keithval, Hexnara said, her voice tight with shock. My fleet has been captured. Not destroyed. Captured. Our ships are intact, our crews unharmed, but all our systems are under human control. They knew exactly where we were, exactly when we would arrive, and exactly how to disable our vessels without firing a shot. The transmission cut out, leaving Keithval staring at dead air. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to understand what had happened. How is that possible? He demanded. Our ships are equipped with the finest defensive systems in the galaxy. They can't be simply switched off by primitives. His answer came 6 hours later when Second Fleet met the same fate near Alpha Centauri. This time, the fleet's final transmission was even more disturbing. "Admiral," came the panicked voice of Second Fleet's commander. "They're everywhere." "How are they everywhere?" "Our sensors showed empty space, but ships are materializing all around us. Our weapons won't lock on, our engines are dead, and our shields—" The transmission dissolved into static. Kethaval found himself staring at tactical displays that made no sense. 2 entire fleets gone without a trace. No debris fields, no energy signatures consistent with battle. No evidence of what had happened except for brief transmissions from captured commanders. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we're detecting energy signatures throughout this system. They're everywhere, all around us." "Impossible. Our sensors would have detected any large fleet presence." "That's just it, sir. There's no large fleet. There are thousands of smaller signatures, but each one is barely cruiser-sized. How could such small ships threaten our battle fleet?" Kethaval was about to respond when space around his fleet shimmered, and suddenly they were not alone. Ships materialized from what had appeared to be empty vacuum, hundreds of them surrounding the Council's most powerful fleet in a perfect sphere. They were sleek, elegant vessels that seemed to bend light around their hulls. "All stop," Kethaval ordered, his earlier confidence evaporating. "Try to hail the lead vessel." The response came immediately. Admiral Torres reappeared on his screen, but now she was clearly on the bridge of one of the mysterious ships surrounding his fleet. "Admiral Kethaval," she said politely, "your fleets have been defeated. Your ships are intact. Your crews are unharmed, and they will be returned to Council space when you're ready to discuss terms. I suggest you reconsider your approach to diplomacy." "This is impossible," Kethaval breathed. "No species possesses technology capable of defeating Council fleets." Torres smiled, and for the first time, there was something sharp in her expression. "Admiral, for 200 years, the Council has assumed that because we didn't ask for your technology, we didn't have technology of our own. You believed that because we remained quiet, we were weak. You thought that because we were polite, we were primitive." She gestured to something off-screen, and Kethaval felt his flagship's engines shut down. All around him, status displays showed system after system going offline. "You were wrong on all counts," Torres continued. "We've been watching you for 2 centuries. We know your ship designs, your tactical doctrines, your defensive capabilities, and your weaknesses. We've been patient because we hoped you would eventually learn to coexist peacefully with species who choose independence." The main display switched to show a tactical overview of the engagement. Kethaval watched in growing horror as the analysis revealed the scope of humanity's victory. Every Council ship was surrounded by multiple human vessels. Every weapon system was neutralized. Every crew was effectively prisoners, though they remained unharmed on their own bridges. "How?" he whispered. "We learned long ago that the best technology isn't always the biggest or the most impressive," Torres replied. "Sometimes it's the quietest. Our ships don't rely on massive armor and overwhelming firepower. They use precision, stealth, and intelligence. We don't build to intimidate, Admiral. We build to win." Around the galaxy, monitoring stations tracked the impossible outcome. The Council's invincible fleets had been defeated by a species that had been dismissed as primitive. The shockwaves from this revelation would reshape galactic politics forever. But perhaps the most telling moment came when one of Kethaval's captured officers reported back to the Council. "They're treating us as honored guests," he said in bewilderment. "They've given us full access to our ship's facilities, excellent food, and even entertainment systems. When I asked why, their captain said that soldiers should not suffer for the mistakes of politicians. The age of Council dominance was ending, and it was ending not with a bang of conquest, but with the quiet competence of a species that had never needed to prove itself to anyone but itself." The emergency session of the Galactic Council that convened 3 days after the defeat was unlike anything in the institution's 3,000-year history. Half the seats sat empty as representatives from dozens of species had simply failed to appear. Those who did attend spoke in hushed whispers, their confidence shaken to its core. Councillor Zexitar sat in his usual place, but the gleaming arrogance that had once defined him was gone. The reports from the captured fleets painted a picture that challenged everything the Council believed about power, technology, and galactic order. The ethereal collective's representative pulsed with somber light as it addressed the assembly. "We have received detailed briefings from all 3 fleet commanders. The scope of humanity's technological capabilities exceeds our most optimistic estimates by several orders of magnitude. Admiral Kethval, who had been returned to Council space along with his entire fleet, stood to give his report. His once proud bearing was replaced by the careful posture of someone who had looked into the abyss and found it looking back. "Honored counselors," he began, his voice lacking its former authority. "Humanity's victory was not achieved through superior firepower or overwhelming numbers. It was achieved through superior understanding. They knew our capabilities better than we knew theirs. They anticipated our strategies before we implemented them. They neutralized our advantages while exploiting weaknesses we didn't know existed. Counselor Thexara, the warrior whose forearms had once gestured with absolute confidence, now kept them folded defensively. Explain the technology they used. Our scientists demand specifics." Kethval consulted his datapad, though the information was burned into his memory. "Their ships employ what they call adaptive stealth systems. Not simple light bending, but technology that renders them undetectable to our sensors while allowing perfect targeting of our vessels. Their weapons don't destroy, they reprogram. They turned our own systems against us." "Reprogram?" Zextar's voice was barely a whisper. "Every ship in my fleet is now equipped with human-designed modifications. They claim these are safety improvements and efficiency upgrades. Our engineers have confirmed that the modifications actually enhance our ship's performance, while adding what can only be described as oversight protocols." The implications hung heavy in the chamber. The humans had not only defeated the Council's fleets, they had improved them and in doing so, had demonstrated a technological supremacy that was absolute. "But perhaps most disturbing," Kethval continued, "was their treatment of our personnel. Every crew member was treated with respect, given comfortable quarters, excellent food, and access to entertainment. When I demanded to know why, Admiral Torres told me that they had no quarrel with soldiers, only with the politicians who sent them." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. This was not how victorious species behaved. Where was the subjugation, the demands for tribute, the installation of puppet governments? The answer came in humanity's next communication, broadcast across the galaxy on all frequencies. President Chen appeared on screens throughout Council space, her expression calm but resolute. "People of the galaxy," she began. 3 days ago, the Galactic Council sent military forces to subjugate humanity. These forces have been defeated, their personnel treated with respect, and their ships returned undamaged. We hold no grudges against the soldiers who were ordered to attack us, nor against the species they represent." She paused, letting her words reach every corner of civilized space. "However, we can no longer pretend that the current galactic order serves anyone but those who profit from it. For too long, species have been forced to choose between submission and isolation. For too long, the strong have ruled not through wisdom but through intimidation. For too long, the galaxy has accepted that might makes right." Around the galaxy, beings who had never dared to question the Council's authority listened with growing hope. "Humanity offers an alternative. We propose a new kind of galactic community, a federation of equals where strength serves protection, not domination, where species develop according to their own values and pace, where cooperation is voluntary and mutual benefit is the goal." The broadcast switched to show representatives from dozens of species, some council members, some independents, some who had been conquered so long ago. Their names were forgotten. "We are not alone in this vision," Chen continued. "Already, 47 species have expressed interest in joining what we call the Terran Federation, not as subjects or protectorates, but as equal partners in building something better." The political earthquake that followed was swift and devastating. Within hours, the Vorthan independent systems formally announced their intention to join the Terran Federation. The Cathani Republic followed suit, then the Solarans, then the Crystalline Communes. Each announcement was accompanied by the same message. They were tired of bowing. In the council chambers, panic set in as representatives realized their carefully constructed empire was crumbling. Species that had provided resources, labor, and military support for millennia were simply walking away. The thread of force that had held the galactic order together for so long was meaningless against an opponent who had already proven immune to it. Counselor Zextar made one final desperate attempt to maintain control. "The humans cannot be allowed to destroy galactic civilization. Without the Council's guidance, these species will fall into chaos and war." The response came from an unexpected source. The ancient ethereal collective, one of the Council's founding members, pulsed with decisive light. Councilor Zextar, their representative, said, "Perhaps it is time to consider that our guidance has become indistinguishable from our tyranny. The humans have offered something we never did, the right to say no." The final blow to Council authority came when Admiral Torres released the tactical data from the engagement. The analysis showed that humanity had been capable of defeating the Council's forces for decades, possibly centuries. They had possessed overwhelming military superiority and had chosen not to use it. "We could have conquered you," Torres stated in her report. "Instead, we chose to wait, to hope, to believe that wisdom would eventually prevail over force. We were wrong about the Council's capacity for wisdom, but we were right about the galaxy's hunger for freedom." The exodus continued for months. By the end of the first year, the Galactic Council controlled less than half its former territory. Some species remained loyal, either from genuine belief or fear of change. Others formed their own independent alliances. But the largest group by far joined the growing Terran Federation. The Federation's founding charter, written by representatives from over 100 species, enshrined principles that would have been considered radical just years before: the right to self-determination, the rejection of forced unity, and the revolutionary idea that different species could coexist without hierarchy. President Chen, now serving as the Federation's first elected leader, addressed the galaxy one final time from Earth. "The age of imposed order is ending," she said. "In its place, we offer chosen cooperation. The galaxy is vast enough for many different ways of life, strong enough to support diversity, and wise enough to learn from each species' unique contributions." She smiled, and in that smile was the patience of a species that had waited 200 years for this moment. Earth remained silent not because we had nothing to say, but because we knew the galaxy wasn't ready to listen. Today, that changes. Today, we build something better together. The broadcast ended with images from across Federation space, former Council worlds celebrating their independence, new trading networks connecting previously isolated species, and joint exploration fleets venturing into uncharted regions of the galaxy. The Council still existed, diminished but not destroyed. Some species preferred the certainty of established hierarchy to the uncertainty of freedom, but they no longer spoke for the galaxy. Humanity had kept its promise. They had remained patient until patience was no longer possible, and when they finally acted, they had changed everything. The galaxy had learned that the quiet ones, the ones who minded their own business and treated others with respect, were not weak. They were just waiting for the right moment to show everyone what strength really looked like.